Hello again, everybody. Charles Raether, AmLaw Group, where we make your dreams a reality in moving to the United States. Today, I wanted to talk about what are the most common questions you'll likely face at an E-2 consulate interview. The E-2 interview is probably one of the most difficult you might have to do at the consulate, just because they tend to ask detailed questions. They tend to probe into different aspects of the business, your background, etc. And they really try to determine, is this really a bona fide business you're going to be engaged in? And do you really know what you're doing? It also depends on what country you're coming from. With Canadians, for example, I mean, it's very laid back, right? They're not going to press you too much on questions. If you're from Western Europe, for the most part, I'd say that's true. If you're from a developing country, maybe Eastern Europe, South Asia, stuff like that, they're more likely to ask a lot of questions about your business, about your background, and your abilities to run and develop the business here in the US. So what are the questions they're likely to ask? Again, each officer is different. So by no means is this intended to be, an exhaustive tutorial. And actually, I would recommend, and we'll include the link in the description, we do have a very good guide for how to nail a consular interview. It's a general overview, not just for E2, but most of the issues we'll discuss today are also in that pamphlet, as well as some other pointers that might be helpful. So what do they ask in an E2 interview? I would say most often, first question is kind of like, tell me about your business. What are you going to do in the United States? And this is what I would say your chance to best sell yourself and your business to the officer. You've got to make the officer believe that you really know this business. You're going to be successful at developing it. You're passionate about it. And, all the figures and numbers and projections in your business plan are, accurate. And so this is not a chance for you to give a 5-minute monologue about why you're going to be so successful and stuff like that. But it's definitely a chance where you could take 10 to 20 seconds. And I always tell my clients, prepare a little mini pitch in your mind about what you're going to say, the main points you want to hit on to most successfully present your business and yourself. So this could be something like, I'm opening a trucking company that's going to provide unique something kind of services in this type of area. And we're planning to hire X amount of people within the next 6 to 12 months, generate top line revenue of approximately this amount, and projecting, net profit in the first year to be X, and by year 3 or year 5, we're projecting net profits to exceed Y. So that kind of, 10, 15 minutes spiel is impressive. It shows you've got all the figures, the numbers in your head, and you can just, let it roll out. Any of you who are familiar with the show Shark Tank, I think it's very similar to that. Although most consular officers would not admit that they're acting like on an episode of Shark Tank, this is really what it is. So again, I think that's almost always the first question that comes out. And if you can create a very first impression with your answer to this question that they pose, I think that will make the whole interview go much, much better. Now, of course, each situation is different. You might have some issues in your past that raise some red flags in the officer's mind. Maybe you had a visa denial previously. Maybe you spent a whole lot of time in America and they might be suspicious where you're working at that time. Maybe you have close relatives who live in the US now, and that might make them suspect that you might immigrate. You might come here on an E-2 and then decide to change status or reunite with your family, stuff like that. So all these other factors are important, and that all depends on the individual case of the client, what their situation is. Have they had denials in the past? Do they have any close relatives living in the US? So you have to be prepared for these kind of questions, and you really need to discuss this all in advance with your attorney so he or she can give you the best advice how to respond to those questions. And again, it's hard for me to give any kind of general responses to these questions, but you just need to flag them in advance, prepare a response in advance so that you're not caught, unexpectedly with this question out of the blue and you start stammering and stuttering and you don't know how to respond. That's kind of the worst thing. This is a bit of a psychological test, I would say. They're looking at how you react, whether they can, get you flustered and nervous and stuff like that. And if you are looking flustered and nervous and you don't know what you're doing, that's not a good sign, folks. That's not a good sign. So you've got to go into that interview confident, cool, collected, and capable of calmly responding to any question they might have. So, like I said, they're going to ask questions about your business. They might ask questions about family members in the U.S. They might ask about your background. Why are you well suited or well prepared to run this business in the U.S.? They might definitely, most definitely, especially if you're coming from a developing country, they're going to ask about your ties to that country. They want to be convinced that you're going to return back at some point to your country of origin. That's not so much an issue with Canadians, not so much with Western Europeans, although it might be, but Eastern Europeans, sometimes from Asian countries, they want to be convinced that you will come back. Now, how do you prove your ties? That's the whole thing. We don't include in the petition, title documents to real property that you own in your home country. We don't include, bank statements showing the rental income you're generating from some rental properties you have in your home country, or your employment agreement with your company you're working for in your home country. This is all done verbally for the most part, and it's very ad hoc. It's very spontaneous. The officer might ask questions, it might not. And if they do ask questions, it just all comes down to a belief or a trust decision. How much do they really believe you? Because from my knowledge, I can't remember any client where if they were asking about that person's ties to his home country, they never said, prove to me that you really own real estate here in Italy so that I know that you're going to come back, or prove to me that your kids are going to school here and stuff like that. It's all done verbally in the course of the interview. And so that's why it's very important for you to be prepared for these questions and have ready answers and have ready good answers. Because if you're kind of stumbling and mumbling and kind of going back and forth, again, this is just as much psychological as it is factual or legalistic. So you need to be prepared with that stuff so that you can provide effective responses. Hopefully this was beneficial to you. If you're looking at doing an E-2, please reach out to us, because we'll be more than happy to share with you our best tips and life hacks, if you want to call that, how to nail the E-2 interview.